Mr. President, I'm going to change topics here, a little more upbeat, if you will, because I want to recognize an extraordinary individual in my state, along with his wife, and I would like to take just a few minutes today to recognize Reverend Dr. Alonzo B. Patterson Jr. and Mrs. Shirley Patterson. During the first week in November, Anchorage is going to host 4 days of events to commemorate the service of 2 of our most beloved community leaders, the Reverend Dr. Alonzo B. Patterson and his wife, Shirley Patterson. Next month, Reverend Patterson leaves the pulpit of Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church. This is a pulpit that he has held for some 47 years. Mrs. Patterson, his wife of 6 decades, is to be recognized for her service as well. Anchorage is one of America's great communities, and it is not uncommon to celebrate the retirement of a figure of Alonzo Patterson's stature. But really, 4 separate days of events, that's huge. And it's a testament to the respect that our community has for the Patterson family. Think about this. Alaska's been a state for just 58 years. Reverend Patterson has had his pulpit for 47 years. And Shiloh is not Reverend Patterson's first pulpit in Alaska, it's his second. He came to Anchorage after founding the Corinthian Baptist Church in Fairbanks. Reverend Patterson grew up with Alaska, and Alaska grew up with Reverend Patterson. Corinthian and Shiloh could appropriately be characterized as African American churches, but for the African American community in Alaska, they were far more than churches. They are centers of Black history in Alaska. Zaika McCummings interviewed Reverend Patterson earlier this year for an article published in the Anchorage Press. And in that interview, Reverend Patterson explained, and he says, "The church was and always has been the sanctuary in the Black community. It's the meeting place, the community center, the focus for support and help, the place you come to be important, the psychologist for your particular problem, the time to shout out your frustrations, and the only place to be significant. You could be a deacon or something in the church where in the rest of the community you were just another Black person. The church was for us a panacea for many of the social ills that existed then and still have relevance." Given the central role that Reverend Patterson has played in Alaska's African American community for most of our state's existence, it's no surprise that he is regarded as a historian of Black culture in Alaska. Ms. McCummings observed that it's a responsibility that he doesn't take lightly. Reverend Patterson told her, "I feel like I have to be the keeper of our historical plight and to speak to each generation in my time. It's a powerful responsibility because if I go to sleep on my watch, then the next watch will have nothing to build on. We're responsible that the gate remains open for the next generation." And under Reverend Patterson's watch, there was much progress. In the 1960s and 70s, Reverend Patterson recalled, "Much of Alaska was a small family business, including the banks. If you were not part of that family or their friends, you had a hard time getting a job. Many of the jobs for African Americans were either construction or government jobs." Reverend Patterson proudly recalls the first Black principal of a state elementary school, an African American banker who was elected to the school board and subsequently to the Alaska legislature, an African American activist in the Fairview section of Anchorage who is regarded as grandfather of the city's public transportation system. Today's African American community is built on the foundation of these pioneers who endured. But make no mistake about this, Alonzo Patterson was no mere spectator to all of this progress. He was an agent of change rooted in his observation. And he stated, "In ministry, there are no limits except the ones we set for ourselves." Under his leadership, Shiloh grew spiritually, physically, and fiscally, and would include a church school, a television ministry, and a jail outreach ministry. On Shiloh's 29th anniversary, the mortgage note for the original structure was burned under the theme, "Burning to Build," and groundbreaking for a new educational wing commenced. And there was more building to come. The Martin Luther King Jr. Family Life Center was dedicated on May 23, 1993. In 2001, Reverend Patterson spun off a new nonprofit organization, Shiloh Community Development, Inc., to serve youth, minorities, and the disadvantaged. Today, Shiloh Community Development is well known for its youth mentoring program called Young Lions of Alaska. He's a founder of Bridge Builders of Alaska, which celebrates the diversity of our communities and a powerful voice in Alaska's annual celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Day. In 2015, Reverend Patterson was the keynote speaker at the King Day ceremonies on J-Bear, and at that ceremony, he warned his audience that Dr. King's dream is at risk of dying. He said, "This dream is at risk if nothing is done, and nothing is holding us back but ourselves. Stop waiting for miracles. Believe in yourself to make society better. Each of us can do our part by loving and respecting others." This is just one example of his powerful voice. Reverend Patterson's sermons were always inspiring, many legendary, and it explains why he is regarded as a pastor's pastor, growing not only his congregants, but the generation of ministers that will follow in his footsteps. And as one who has joined in the congregation there at Shiloh on numerous occasions, I can attest that there was never a Sunday that I did not leave feeling inspired by the words of Dr. Patterson. They don't call the appreciation festivities for Reverend Patterson a retirement ceremony. They're calling it a transition, probably because nobody believes that Reverend Alonzo Patterson has any intention of pursuing a future of leisure. Leadership and inspiration runs in Alonzo Patterson's DNA. So we wish him and Shirley well in their next calling, and we take comfort in the fact that their contributions to our community are far from over. November marks a transition, not a retirement, and certainly not a eulogy for this extraordinary Alaska family. So on behalf of my Senate colleagues, I'd like to thank Dr. Alonzo Patterson and his lovely wife Shirley for their good works, and thank them in advance for their continued leadership.